Michael, as I said, is one of Berkeley's great treasures and a terrific supporter of the library and has been for a long time, honored many times at the annual authors dinner, and just someone who writes so well and so prolifically that it's a great honor to have him here tonight, and thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Michael has been in the locker room of the A's, and the result was Moneyball, which you may have read. He's been on the trading floor with the Solomon Brothers, and the result was Liar's Poker. So now he's been in the Oval Office, in the presidential residence, on Air Force One, and on the basketball court with President Obama over a period of 6 months. How did that happen?
8 months.
8 months.
And it was a really strange experience. But this is, how many people saw the piece I wrote about it? Wow. Wow. I mean, it's interesting to me because the magazine is the magazine. It's a magazine piece. And I just assume people who see it are Vanity Fair people. And
well, I think we encouraged it, right?
That's incredible. Well, anyway, I had finished, I'd just come off a book tour last November for Boomerang, my last book. And I knew I had about a year where I was going to be mainly doing screenplays I owed people. And I didn't have time to do a book, but I wanted to do some reporting. And I was thinking, kind of fantasizing about if I was going to do a magazine piece, what would it be? And I've long thought that the world would benefit from a kind of in-your-shoes account of the presidency.
This presidency
in
particular? Or
no, any president. It wasn't this presidency in particular. I tried to do this with Clinton. But the Clinton people flirted with me for a bit and then decided, no, they didn't want to do it.
He was known for that.
Yeah, he was good. He was a flirt. Do you have first-hand experience?
No. In my dreams.
Yeah, you may. How was it?
Great in my dreams.
Well, so there was this piece of journalism I've been fascinated by for a long time. It ran in the New Yorker in, I don't know, 1950-something, when a writer I've always admired, John Hersey, most famous for Hiroshima, his reportage after the bombs were dropped. But he did this thing with Harry Truman, where and it opens in the New Yorker with him literally knocking on the door. At that point, Truman was living in Blair House because the White House was under construction. And Truman opens the door at 6 in the morning and goes for a walk with him along the Potomac, just the two of them and a Secret Service guy, or security guy. And then they go have a sauna together, and from there, naked. And it proceeds from there. And I thought, at the end of this piece of journalism, I mean, you won't know whether John Hersey is a Democrat or Republican, whether he approves of Truman, what Truman's done, this or that. He doesn't actually ever mention in this course of a 5-part series the atom bomb. And he'd written a book about it, about that decision that Truman had made. But you came away feeling, I know this guy, and I understand this job. And the job has changed so much in response to technology, to globalization. I thought it was time to refresh this and try to give people a sense of what it was like to be. I was just curious, really. So I sent an email to Jay Carney, the White House press secretary, he's a friend of a friend, and sent him the Hersey piece. And said, I want to do something like this, and I think that I don't know whether it's in your interest or not. I can't tell you, but to do it, I'd really just kind of need to shadow the president. I need to kind of walk in his shoes. And I want to do things like play basketball with him. I said I wanted to caddy on the golf course for him. And I mean, we gave him a long list of things I wanted to do. Sit in meetings, that kind of thing. And he came back the next day and said, we'd really like to do this, or we might like to do this. And I said, who'd like to do this? And he said, he'd like to do this. The president would like to do this. And I said, how does everybody else at the White House feel about it? And he said, we really don't want to do it. and so there ensued this, it was a little bit of a mating dance. I mean, it was, and I went, he said, it's a little awkward now because everybody really doesn't want to do it, and the president kind of wants to do it. But you can't really tell the president no, but it's not going to be useful to you if nobody wants you here, because they'll find ways to kind of keep you out. so I went to Washington in early January, and I did a kind of, it amounted to like a Goldman Sachs job interview. I mean, going around and meeting the managing directors. I met all the important, Plouffe and Valerie Jarrett, one after the other, and just told them, and presented it really, I could take this or leave this. This isn't something I'm dying to do, but I just think it would be interesting to do. But it only works if you want to do it. It's up to you, kind of thing. And I think the level of disinterest that I suggested kind of impressed them. that I didn't care one way or the other. It was the soft sales pitch. And then it was very funny because I was there for a day, and they knew I was leaving at the end of the day, go and get on an airplane. And a woman from the press office breaks into my last meeting 5 minutes into it, and she's flustered, really flustered. And she says, Michael, this interview is over. This is exactly what she said. This interview is over. You have to leave. And I thought either something's happened in the world that's really, really horrible, or I'm getting thrown out of the White House. And she grabs me. She doesn't say a word and runs me around. In the White House, it's very easy to get lost. I'm still disoriented, especially the West Wing. And we open a door, and I'm in the Oval Office, and it's just me and Obama. And not scheduled, not anything. And he was sitting there reading an email and laughing. He said, look at this. He says, hey, how you doing? Come on in. And he said, look what I just got sent. He just got handed this email. And the email was from an outraged parent at the Sidwell Friends School, which is where he sends his children. And Obama was then, or he has, coached the basketball teams of his two girls. And say one's in the 8th grade, one, I don't know what they are, but 8th grade, 6th grade, 9th grade, 7th grade, whatever they are. And so they say 8th grade, 6th grade. And this letter was from a parent of a 7th grader at the Sidwell Friends School saying, Dear Mr. President, I found it outrageous that you're coaching the 8th and the 6th graders and not the 7th graders. And he was saying, welcome to my world.
Yeah, right. Can't do anything right.
You can't do anything right. And he was very funny about it. And then we proceed to have kind of like a 45-minute chat. What then happens is someone comes in and starts taking our picture together, and I was so disoriented because I really wasn't expecting this that I actually had the thought, I really don't want to have my picture taken. I'm not interested in this, but if Obama wants his picture taken with me, all right. And when I was at the airport an hour later, I thought, oh my God, that's how screwed up my brain was, that I actually had that thought. So the conversation is just in person, he's informal. And it's probably gotten even better at putting people at their ease because he spends his life with people who are on edge the whole time with him because he's the president. And after about 10 minutes, it really was just like talking to a guy. And it was great. But it was pointless. And it was of no purpose and really use to me because the thing I needed to do was watch him do things or do things with him. But I just sit down talking to him, I didn't have that much interest in that.
Was this the point at which you already knew that it was going to happen?
No, he said.
Or were you interviewing for the job?
No. He said, "Oh, we're going to do this." It sounds like he said, "You're here because it's fine. You know, everybody liked you. You're fine. Come on."
How does he find time to coach two basketball teams?
Well, the question I had, he does it intermittently, and he ropes in former college basketball players to sub for him.
Wow.
And so it's a pretty slick operation, I think. And the teams are they're bussed to, I think, the FBI building, and he uses the basketball court in the FBI building when they're
for the girls basketball.
Right. It's got to be a great experience. But the question I had was, how does he find the time to talk to me? Because I wasn't on the schedule, and I was kind of doing this because I thought, if he thinks this is some of my budgeted time, I want as little of it as possible because I need other stuff if we're going to do this. Let's not waste it with chit chat.
What was he asking you for?
He was asking me how much I had to do with the movie Moneyball, and he wanted to have some conversation about the financial crisis, but he didn't. It wasn't like he really cared what I thought. He read The Big Short.
Did he say, oh, Michael, you're such a great writer?
No, not ever once. This is the funny thing. Because there was never a moment, just the opposite, that if anything, he was cutting me down to size. Whenever, if there was anything that way, it was the opposite. It was jokingly like cut me up a little bit. But and this was one of the striking traits in him, because I've spent time with a lot of politicians, and the first step is usually flattery. And they're natural. The way they interact with people most comfortably is I flatter you, you flatter me, and that's how it works. And I think it's because he himself is so not needy. He doesn't have the need for it, and there's no interest in it. He does not want to be flattered. That he doesn't sense that other people might need it. And so I wasn't actually hungering for him to tell me how much he loved my books, but I was kind of curious what he'd read, because obviously he read something or I wouldn't have been there. And he didn't tip his hand very much that way. What happened was, the natural question was, we're sitting there, is who was supposed to be here? I'm sitting here talking to him. Who was he supposed to be talking to?
How did he get that free time?
Yeah, because it wasn't on the schedule. And we opened. And finally, when he finally says, "I'll see you in a week when you come back," we walked out, and cooling their heels in his lobby outside of his door was Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and the chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I thought this could work. Yeah. If I'm going to get precedent, if I'm going to have priority over the chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's about enough access. Yeah.
Well, now you had a premise for this, which was to ask him to presume that something happened. He was no longer president. What would he tell you about becoming president, or how to do it, or what it was like?
The nature of our interactions, there were kind of several ways I was able to interact with him. One of them was they just give me the pin that said I basically worked for him. That was okay from the eyes of the Secret Service, and I could just shadow him where he went, and I'd just sit on his elbow. And that was a lot of just banter. It wasn't appropriate really to interview him, but I could watch him do whatever he was doing.
How often were you with him in that time?
A week, a month for 8 months. And I wasn't with him all the time, but I would go to Washington for a week a month and hop on Air Force One when he hopped on Air Force One. And he'd put me in a cabin that was separate from the journalists. It was so they couldn't see me. And he would come get me when he had free time, just grab me. But when we were having, when it was, well, this happened on Air Force One a bunch. It was clear it was 30 minutes till we were going to land, or 45 minutes. I wanted to really structure it. And I tried to make it like a series of games with him. It was just play. And the game we played most often was, he was a little jarred by the first time I did it. Because I said, let's assume that in 30 minutes, you're not going to be president anymore, I'm going to be president. Teach me in 30 minutes what I need to know to do the job. And it was so funny the first time, he couldn't get through his head that I was president. He just wouldn't, he just couldn't, he was trying to kind of play along, but it kept reverting to him as president. And I had to keep saying, you're not president, I'm president. So you got to teach me how to be president. And he got better and better at it. So I had to come back to him several times with this. I said, last time you didn't do this that well, so let's do it again. And it was a way of getting at the job. I was just trying to get at the job. And I was trying to write the thing. It's so hard to write about this subject now because people bring such baggage to it. The baggage to him especially. I mean, it's probably especially tough with him, though I imagine for different reasons it would have been very tough with Bush too. They're also, the job inherently polarizes people about you.
In this case particularly.
In this case particularly, probably, that's right. And so I wanted to reach a reader. I wanted the reader to try to drop their preconceptions, and also to think of it more as a thing not about this guy so much as about how you function in this job, and it happens to be this guy. So I was always coming at it from strange angles to get that out of him, and it interested him. That is what interested him most, because he's very interested. He's a student of the job. He's in the job and he's a student of the job, but he can't really talk about it very much. So it was, once he got going, it was great.
What did he tell you?
Well, a lot. It was pretty quickly. it became clear that how much of his day was about just decision making, and how little of his day was about political angles. Like the conversation was just not about that. It was about this thing's happening somewhere. Sometimes it's just down the street, and what's the best way to respond to it? There's so much incoming. That's the thing that's so jarring about the job, disturbing about the job, is that you never have a moment when there isn't something awful happening that you have to respond to.
Were you ever there on a day when there was something in particular that was very newsworthy or very important that happened?
Well, I was in the back of his car with him at night when we got to the hotel. He learned about the shootings in the movie theater in Aurora. I'm trying to think what else. You know, it was kind of, when I prodded him on that, there would always be something. He said, "Oh, this morning there was a coup in Mali." And I didn't know there would have been a coup in Mali. And he said, and I actually had to, he said, sorry, you know, he meant to come back and get me in the plane a little earlier. He said, and he came back 10 minutes later than he was going to. And he said, sorry, but there was a coup in Mali. And it was just, there was always a coup in Mali. And there was always some response that was required. So there was a decision making, there's so much decision making in the job. And that the kind of decisions he's making, are always bad decisions. If it gets to him, no matter what he does, there's a very good chance it's going to be wrong. That he's always making these judgments. It's 55-45 for doing it. But you try to make the best decision, but this decision is hard because it's hard.
Otherwise, someone else would have
already solved. They don't bring the easy decisions to him. And he had constructed his environment to maximize the possibility he was going to make good decisions. So this suit I'm wearing is a result of him. Because he told me, he said, there's all this trivia in your life. He said that he was talking about research that showed the mere act of making decisions degrades your ability to make further decisions. And his example was, you walk into Costco and you don't know what you want exactly. You come out an hour later exhausted because you're making and it is exhausting. You wonder why. And it is because decision making, even about trivial things, is tiring. And so he had scrubbed his environment of the trivial decisions. And what he wore was one of the trivial decisions. He had only blue and gray suits, he said. So he didn't have to even think about what he was putting on. And what he eats, he doesn't have to think about. And so what time he's going to get up and what time he's going to go to bed and when he's going to exercise and all that stuff. It's all, he's very routinized for that reason. And he's so not that way naturally. He's so naturally more kind of improvisational. That's his kind of his nature and kind of free-flowing. And so it was interesting to see someone who had come to a job that was so alien to his nature.
This is sort of presumptuous, do you have a sense that he feels in some way trapped by this job?
He always seems so happy. He's basically a happy person, an optimistic, sunny disposition. So he didn't seem weighed down by it that way. I didn't meet his wife. I don't know what she would say to that. I would guess she would be more likely to think this is a trap. He thought, but the way that expressed itself, I would say yes, he probably does, but he probably doesn't completely acknowledge it to himself. The way the frustration with the nature of the enterprise expresses itself is in fantasies about escape. And this isn't in the piece, but one of his aides described with me, he was walking with Obama out through the Rose Garden. There's kind of a path out the back of the White House, and you can walk around a bit. And there's a gate. You can actually open the gate from the inside. And Obama no longer carries a wallet. I asked him to show me what was in his wallet. He says, "There's no point anymore. I don't carry it." But he still had his wallet on him at that point. So it must have been kind of early in his presidency. And he said to the person he was walking with, he said, "I wonder if we could just leave." He says, if we just, nobody's here, if we could just open the gate and walk and caught a cab, I have money, he said, and we can go to Washington, to National Airport, and we can buy a plane ticket and go anywhere we want. Nobody could stop me, right? I could just do that. And he went on and on about that. And his favorite place in the White House is the Truman balcony because it feels like you're not in the White House anymore. You're kind of out in the trees around. There's a tree house feel to it. It feels almost natural. He fantasizes about, and this is the one time he actually got visibly irritated with me, aside from when I almost screwed up his basketball game, was when I said, you know, one of the things that must be hard to accept is that you're screwed for the rest of your life. You are in this situation for the rest of your life. He says, no, I'm not. I says, when I'm done with the job, we're gonna get back to normal. And I said, no. Every room you walk into is going to be prepared for you. Every interaction is going to be in some way staged and artificial. You're never going to see people the way. You're going to have Secret Service protection for the rest of your life. Because actually, one of the things that would have prompted this particular exchange was when I was asking him about his wallet. He said he had actually not long before gone and checked on his wallet in the residence and saw that his driver's license had expired. And he actually said, "Looks like I need to get to the DMV when I'm done." And I said, "You don't really think you're going to drive? You'll never drive again." He goes, "Yes, I will." You know, he was really, really adamant about it. And
I guess he has to hold on to that.
He holds on to it. That's right. And at the end of the piece, as he spins this fantasy, I did one of the games we played. I said, because I sensed this was an issue with him. Tell me, I grant you a day when none of this ever happened. I mean, you think about this life, it really is incredible. I mean, this is the other thing about this president. He's so implausible. Almost, not so much because he's a black man, but because he's a normal guy. That he wasn't junior class president. He wasn't always aiming for this kind of, that he ended up president, and it happened so fast that he, I think mentally he got to a point in his life where he was very happy as a normal person without any kind of celebrity and the idea that this is a permanent condition, very frustrating to him, I think.
That runs counter to some people's theory that he was a striver and trying to get to the presidency and leapfrogging other positions and moving on quickly from one thing to another politically. So in that sense, he was sort of aiming for the top.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lifelong quest. I mean, he picked a very strange first, 30 years of his life if he was aiming to be president of the United States.
Yeah.
And the idea, it must have never, the idea that it could happen to him, it could never have crossed his mind. In fact, we did talk about this at one point, how strange it all was. In the context of sort of, I got interested in what had woken him up intellectually, because he was an indifferent student until rather late in his high school career. And he said he had been, I didn't write about this, but it was kind of interesting. He was kind of a junior in high school, and he was walking down the street past a church yard sale, and he saw some books, and they were a nickel each. And he thought, wow, that's a steal. And he wasn't even particularly interested in the books. He bought the books because he thought they were cheap. And there was some Saul Bellow, Moby Dick, some Dostoevsky, and he started reading. And he said he wasn't self-conscious. He just got absorbed in the books, and he all of a sudden wanted to be a writer.
I hope he got a library card.
And well, that's right. It's the kind of thing that happens in the library, right? And his ambition is clearly, his early ambition was literary. He wasn't setting out to be president. He was setting out to be, Saul Bellow, and he was submitting short stories. He kept a journal. He was submitting fictional short stories to literary magazines, and he got rejected all the time. And you wonder what would have happened in that life if, the Swanee Review or someone had picked up one of his stories and done him a favor.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably would still be churning out fiction. He would be.
So is that what you think might happen after he's president?
So this segues to why he's so irritated about the idea that he can't get back to some normal interaction with the world, because it's very hard to be a writer if you don't have it. Ask Salman Rushdie. That you get cut off in some way from your material. And I was saying you're kind of cut. You can never write a book like your first book again because you're cut off from your material. It's all artificial. And it was funny how insistent he was that wasn't true. And I had to argue with him about it. I actually said to him, I said, we'd gone to Cartagena for that conference where the Secret Service were diddling. Yeah. And And we got there, and in a kind of not so great Hilton hotel, there was this beautiful new gym. And all the machinery almost had price tags on it. It was that new. And I'd found out that they'd thrown it together very hastily before he arrived, because the president uses the gym in the morning. And I said, you know, like that gym you went to, you don't think that was there? And he looked, he goes, what do you mean? And, you know, I said, they built that for you. You know, your life is going to be a series of Potemkin villages that you're going to, and it's all kind of staged for you. And that area, he was not pleased with that kind of line of discussion. He said he didn't want to accept that. This is funny. It was funny to watch. This is an aside. The way people respond to him. And there was a gym. Someone would make a point to get up in the morning and go to the gym if we were staying overnight somewhere, because I know he'd be there, and sometimes it would be only him there, but he has this kind of thing happen to him all the time. We were in Oklahoma City, and staying in a Hyatt or something. And I got up at 7 in the morning and went down to the gym, and there were 4 or 5 Secret Service people outside the gym, and they wand you, and then they let you in. And I assumed he was in there. There was no one in there. So I'm on the treadmill, and then sure enough, 10 minutes later, he walks in. And I don't know where the Secret Service went, but 10 minutes after that, he's on the treadmill, I'm on a treadmill, and there's a little chit-chat, and then we're off and just doing exercise. And a kid walks in, and he's maybe 23, 24. He's got some stubble. Looks like he's been out all night, but he's in his gym clothes, and he's kind of groggy. And he walks in, and the Secret Service didn't vet him. And he goes, and he sees Obama on the treadmill, and he goes walks around the treadmill, and he goes, really? Really? And Obama's just trying to get his exercise, and this kid he's just kind of losing it. He goes, you're kidding me, right? You're kidding me? And finally someone hears, and the Secret Service comes running and pulls him away. But there's nothing natural now about being Barack Obama, and he's such a natural man. It's such a difficult thing.
Did he introduce you to his daughters?
Yes.
He did?
He did. He said, this is my friend Michael. And he did that because he had taken me into the residence without telling his wife, I'm almost sure. His wife was away. I'd asked him to show me his favorite place in the White House at the end of the day. The game that day was I was going to do his commute with him. So I met him in the morning and commuted to work, which is a walk. And then we hung around his office for 20, 30 minutes, and he showed me around. And then I met him at the end of the day and did the commute back. But the idea was supposed to stop at the elevator door before he went up to his rooms, to the residence.
That's supposed to, who says who?
Well, I didn't ask for it. I didn't
okay.
I didn't say I want to see the residence. And I didn't ask to meet anybody. I never asked to meet Michelle.
Did you want to? But
it would have been nice,
feel like
but I
asking?
didn't. You know, my feeling is that if you want, the best way to get something from someone who is in that situation, he's asked for things all the time. Everyone who sees Barack Obama wants something from him. When people heard that I was going to the White House, they'd call me and ask me for stuff to ask him. This is preposterous. And so my approach was, I'm not going to ask for anything. And what just comes my way, comes my way. He's so smart, he knows what it is I'm trying to do. He's read stuff I've done. He knows what would be beneficial. I did ask, just show me what your favorite place in the White House is. It could have been the Oval Office. And it was in the residence. And so he took me up, and Michelle was away. And it was the only time I saw him a little nervous, because nobody goes to the residence. I mean, it's just they want to create a private space for their kids. His mother-in-law was clearly surprised when I walked off the elevator with him. And he didn't. I think what he thought he could get away with is no one ever know who this was with him. Just a guy came up with Dad for a little while, and then he left.
His buddy.
Yeah, yes. And so I was his friend Michael, and I talked to the girls for a little bit. They were kids. They reminded me, they're the same age as my daughters. It's the same kind of thing, same vibe.
If you saw him again, what do you think your relationship would be?
I saw him last Tuesday. When he came through and asked, called, and the secretary, Jay Carney called and said, come on over, and I went backstage before he did his event and spent a little time with him. It's
Buddy.
Comfortable.
Yeah.
It's just easy. As easy as it can be with the President of the United States.
Right.
But I mean, he doesn't really, so gave me a hug. He gave me a hug and he said that it was interesting the way the piece turned out. And I said, "Did you really read it?" Because he doesn't actually, I don't like most people who are in that, they don't really want to be reading about themselves. But he clearly had read it. And he was interested in sort of how it went down. He said after the election, you got to come back. He assumes he's going to win.
Yes,
and he says you got to come back. He says, he actually said, "We won't be playing basketball though." He says, "You play anything else?" I said, "I bowl."
Did you get a sense during all of this that he's sensitive, it registers with him, there's any bitterness about the accusations that he's a Muslim, that he comes from Kenya, that he's a socialist, and all that stuff? Does that register
So
with
people have different emotional ranges, different emotional registers, right? And some people are very quick to bitterness and resentment and all that. It's not really in his repertoire. It's not where he goes, and it isn't. It's probably also it's strategic not to allow himself to feel that way about things. Mm-hmm. But I actually think he genuinely doesn't. That he genuinely thinks when things are said about him, he thinks they're not about him. He thinks that it's about whoever's saying them, and so he looks at them with interest. Why? What is it that the person's trying to tell me about themselves in what they say? And so he's a canvas on which people project things. And the problem with that, which he also acknowledges, is that if your view is that all the time, if there's some legitimate criticism, you're not going to be hearing it very, very well. Mm-hmm. And I think probably he pays a price for his detachment. And it's very healthy to have that detachment. And I think if you were normal about criticism in that office, you would go insane in about 4 days. Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing that people say about him, is that he's so detached that he's somehow unreachable.
Well, that wasn't my experience with him. It's not that he's very reachable. It's very easy to talk to him, and very easy to his face. You don't feel. It's not that difficult to say critical things to him. It's the stuff it's the talk shows, the cable talk shows, and what's in the newspaper. And
yeah.
And he says you try to just not filter too much. But I tell you what he did actually last Tuesday when I went to see him. I was asking him about how he was feeling these days, and he was laughing about what had happened. He said this and that about it, but he said
the debate.
Yeah, about the debate, and he said the funny thing is the one time I really read stuff about me is when there's a really negative stuff and there's a negative period, because it helps me process it. He says I've been reading all that stuff, so he'd been paying a lot of attention to what people had said about the debate, but he processes it a little differently. I mean, he's not thinking this is all true. Maybe some of it's true, maybe some of it's not, but he's at least seeing it. He's not just ignoring it. He doesn't do what, say, Bush did. I think Bush said he didn't read the newspapers, right? I mean, Obama reads a bunch. He's surfing the web at night, late at night, all the time, every night. He's reading the papers, a lot of newspapers. He's very informed.